to Spitballing from the Balcony. My name is Randy Levante, or Dr. Randy, or better yet, alias with my kids, Grandpa Randy. And I've had, well, more than 30 years in the education system, but 20 years in the digital and online for sure. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to be heading up the Canadian e-learning network, or CanElearn, as the CEO. And we've decided, my colleague here, that we're going to start shifting things a bit. And besides just blogging, we're actually going to start podcasting. So this is our first attempt at this. And so welcome.
And hi everyone, I'm Dr. Michael Canio, better known as Grandpapa here. And like Randy, I have a little bit of experience as well. I have 30 years of experience in the educational sector, 20 years plus in the world of business, and with five grandchildren. And we decided, I think, between the two of us that we had a lot to say based on our academic background and our practical experience, things we thought we could share with you and our perspective on some hot button issues that are occurring right now in education and a lot of things tied to AI in particular.
What a pleasure it is to be part of this terribly cerebral podcast with two eminent scholars like you, Randy and Michael. I will jump into this podcast whenever I feel you two are straying into those nebulous areas that require sharp and critical observations. Incidentally, thanks for calling me Annie. I think I like that name. Now that should be as much as I need from you two.
So, Grandma, Randy, let me start off with maybe a little story that goes back a few years, actually, maybe almost 10, 12 years ago. And at that time, I was the CEO of Learn, a nonprofit educational organization. And we had been giving online high school courses to students across the province quite successfully
Mm-hmm.
for a number of years at that time. And we're very proud of what we were doing because we had decided that we were going to employ in a synchronous fashion a socially constructivist model. So I was a little cocky about it all because I was proud to see that our students were actively participating in the learning, the collaboration among the students and projects. And we were trying to keep it as much as possible authentic and project based. Now, needless to say, that required a lot of effort from both teachers and students. And many students found it very challenging because they'd never been asked to learn this way. This was a whole new experience for them.
But it's quite different from traditional education. I mean, where are the bums in seats in rows with a teacher at the front telling them what they should learn and what they should do, and then handing out worksheets to have them regurgitate it?
Which brings me back to my story. I was having a conversation with the director of another educational organization. Their model really was what I call a course in a can. It was an asynchronous model where the students followed a very tight script, and every week they would work on a different topic and they'd answer questions, then send them in. And then if they had any questions, they could either email or I think at specific hours, telephone the associated teacher. But anyway, this director challenged me and said, listen, students much prefer lectures over project-based learning. And he didn't understand why I was so proud of our approach.
If given the choice, I'd rather sit back and just take some notes and prepare myself for the test because that's what the mark is for. But it also sounds very much like how I started teaching. I was a curriculum deliverer. I taught senior science as well as junior science in a secondary school building, etc. And the students were great. I mean, I did use overheads and I had a lot of pen marks all over my hand at the time, but now I could just do slideshows on a data projector, which is great because I can cover the curriculum and I can cover the curriculum, which covers the test, which means that I'm doing my job. Well, that was great for me until I actually tried to do that in an elementary school setting. Try that with a group of kindergarten, primary students, and for me, it was a grade 5, 6 split. I almost flamed out. I literally almost quit. Woke up in the morning and said, "That's it. I'm not going into school. I'm not teaching. I'm going to work in the supermarket," because that's what I had been doing to support my education.
Randy, I hear what you're saying. Kids learn when they're involved and engaged in the learning process. I pointed this out to the other director. I said they will retain longer. They're going to want to continue. They'll be more motivated. Anyway, he summarily dismissed my whole point, and his answer to me was, "Why don't you just stick to what works?" And he walked away, and
So,
that was the end of that discussion.
but it doesn't work. I learned that the hard way. It doesn't work. Who does it work for if he says it just works? Does that work for the system, the bureaucracy, for, the accountability through an examination? Perhaps. Does it work for kids to actually learn? What do they retain from that? I mean, when I think, and I would invite anyone who's listening to this to reflect back on their own learning experiences as a student. What were the significant events and strategies and things that teachers did that really stood out for you? And every time I look at that and reflections on other blogs of other educators, etc., there usually was some kind of a completely off the wall teacher that did things unconventionally and really had a huge impact in you and your thinking. So, I mean, think about it. That happens, but at great effort and also at great risk sometimes for teachers because they've got noisy classrooms. And God forbid, a noisy classroom is not a productive one, right?
Well, you think maybe not, Randy. Noisy classrooms maybe suggest that something is happening. Not necessarily always good, but on the other hand, it could be a sign that they're interacting, they're collaborating. But let's be honest. If we ask people take the easy route or take the hard route, most people are going to choose the path of least resistance. I've done it myself. Maybe
Mm.
that's human nature, but we always migrate.
I've never done that.
No, well, you're different, right?
No shortcuts in my world.
No shortcuts in your, but we migrate to our most congenial environments. And that's something I learned from my business background. So we always go back to what we know and what we like to do. It's easy and but the problem is that easy is not necessarily the solution, is it? Research has consistently shown us that deeper learning occurs when students actively engage with content rather than passively receiving information. It's productive struggle. And that's not a flaw in learning, it's a requirement for learning. And that's something we gloss over very quickly. We need to make sure they understand that they're motivated, engaged, and they're making an effort.
It's interesting because I think back to my elementary time is that when I tried to force the kids to sit in rows and listen to what it was that I was saying, which was curriculum, they were fidgeting, they were acting out, they were spitballing literally each other, not from the balcony, but essentially they were active, but not focused in their actions. When I started to redesign the classroom and had learning stations and centers and group work in the corners and all sorts of, it was still noisy and they were still moving, but they were doing it for a purpose and they were doing it for cognitive stimulation as opposed just to ignore me or harass me.
Yeah, and that brings me really, I think, to what we wanted to discuss today, Randy, and that is that as we look at artificial intelligence, be it Gemini or Claude, or I was going to say Grog, I hope no one's using Grog,
No,
or
no, no, please,
ChatGPT,
no.
please no. There's no question that AI is making life easier. I just read this morning that they're going to combine ChatGPT with Codex. Programmers do their job a lot more easily, and they're going to integrate it so that people who want to create new programs, new resources, AI agents, it's going to be easier. The whole point is that AI is making life easier everywhere. And we're moving towards a world where effort can be outsourced. Randy, can I suggest that we ask our chatbot what our chatbot thinks about all this?
Tell me, boys, how hard do you think it will be for students and teachers to choose the option to work harder, give up free time when they could be just chilling? Let me, your friendly chatbot to make life easy, let me do the heavy lifting. Things like thinking and higher order nonsense. Besides, I can do it better than you and a whole lot faster.
Less work, less effort, faster results. Who wouldn't want that? Look, we know that AI agents have already entered the workforce. They're there. And yeah, I know before the skeptics jump in and say, yeah, but there was a problem here, there's a problem. We're still in the early days. There are bugs still to work out, but they're here to stay. In fact, Gemini just recently announced plans for personal AI agents, and these agents will conduct internet searches, gather information, analyze data, synthesize findings, organize results, produce finished outputs.
That's like an unprompted AI, though. Do you set parameters around your agent and what they're going to actually do? Do you oversee them? I don't know. That one scares me a little bit. Starting to think about the Matrix again.
Look, Grandpa Randy, educators were already struggling with traditional Google searches. You remember? I mean, search engines were going to make it too easy for students to copy information,
Mhm.
um, cheat, plagiarize. Um, but what we're facing now is something on a completely different scale. It's much bigger than we've ever anticipated.
So, Grandpapa, so you're telling me the machine doesn't just find information, it processes it?
Like, exactly. It searches, it evaluates, it summarizes, it writes, it presents conclusions. It does it all.
Oh man, and then I'll just accept the output because it's got to be right because that's pretty complicated and I can't do it.
And it's easy. It's
Oh, good,
easy.
good. I
And
love the easy solutions.
but here's where I have other big concerns. Are there any alarm bells ringing for you,
Oh,
Grandpa Randy?
seriously. If that's the case, there's not enough alarm bells ringing.
All right. So let me imagine now we're all using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. Think about the implications. Will everyone receive essentially the same answers to the
Hmm.
same questions? Will everyone start from the same assumptions? Will everyone arrive at the same conclusions? So do you know what that's leading us to, right?
Well, are we creating conditions for groupthink? I don't know. What does the chatbot think?
Well, let's find out.
Boys, if I could laugh, I would. Please listen up now. Seriously, Michael and Randy, are you really worried that using chatbots like me will lead you to groupthink? I'm here to serve you, and you know I would never do anything that is not in your interests. And incidentally, I know your interests better than you do yourselves. Relax, boys, stretch out, and go practice your pickleball serves. Leave the heavy lifting to me.
Annie, why should I believe you? But anyway, it's good advice. I'll go practice my pickleball serving.
But it does concern me. In fact, it does more than concern me. It terrifies me.
And this isn't some distant future, is it? Like it's kind of happening now. And I made an allusion to the movie Matrix because that's sort of one that's fascinated me in my past history and the whole digital world that might surround us. And so, I mean, is this Agent Smith in a linear code? Is Annie just the
You
newer
know,
or about to be a version of Agent Smith in that movie?
well, I think Matrix was done about 25 years ago. I think something along those lines. The problem is that this is not in the distant future or even the near future. This is now. It's happening right now. The technology exists, and adoption is accelerating. And please don't get hung up on the bugs. There have been bugs, and there will continue to be bugs. But you notice people don't talk about hallucinations quite as much as they did in the past, or they're making the wrong assumptions or conclusions. Still happens, but not nearly on the level that it's happened before. So now what do we see? Businesses in particular are accelerating in their integration of AI into the workforce. It's going to happen. It's there.
So then surely educational leaders recognize that. I mean, they're surrounded by AI too. And so are we really not no longer preparing students for that workplace? Surely those
Well,
that lead education must see that.
the ideal response would be to develop students who can think critically, evaluate evidence, challenge assumptions, prompt AI effectively, identify bias, detect inaccuracies, separate facts from speculations, research independent conclusions, to do all those wonderful things. That's what we're preparing them for right now. I'm so proud of them.
So in other words, students will become better thinkers rather than just consumers of AI generated content. That's what you're arguing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. That's the sarcastic, cynical me speaking here. Unfortunately, while we might see some of these things happening in isolated cases, it's not what's happening on a larger scale. In fact, we're seeing certain jurisdictions where they're removing anything and everything that's digital. In my province here in Quebec, they've gone from beyond moving cell phones away to rethinking the use of laptops and tablets altogether. So while there are schools making isolated schools making progress, and some educators are innovating, we shouldn't use these outliers to placate and make ourselves feel comfortable. We're not ready. We need to be doing a whole lot more, and we need to be doing it on many, many levels.
So in other words, I think what you're describing is that while things come to disrupt the bureaucracy of education, the structures which have been created and are persisting for, over 100 years easily, for that, there are some educators that are reacting against and using these changes that are disrupting to improve education. But what I'm seeing and suggesting you're saying is that the system is actually retreating backwards from it and going back to traditional things like exams, like marking people's students for being in front of teachers, which is what some of the things that are proposed at the same time in Ontario. Well, there's innovation going in the education system, public and more importantly, private at the same time, that actually are embracing the changes and leveraging them to improve student education and learning. But the bureaucracy and system is retreating back from that, is what you're saying.
From the politics of it all, the politicians who feel that when they take backwards to basic steps, that they're answering the need and interest of the public, and that this will garner favor for them. So yeah,
But
we're
but is
not.
it driven from fear?
It's
That people are afraid, parents are afraid, so they just want to retreat back to what's known and comfortable for
Look,
that?
there's fear, there's ignorance. But here's the truth of the matter: is that in the world of business, you, a company can't afford to put aside what's happening in progress. You either change and improve, and innovate, or you perish. And in our schools, we have never made, for example, critical thinking a priority. We've talked about it. We've written it into curriculum documents, but we are not preparing our students for the AI era, and they're not addressing the things that we need to be addressing. Um,
Wow.
can I ask Annie what she thinks about this, or if you
Yeah,
don't mind, Randy?
yeah,
Let me
for
just
sure.
hear her input.
Chill out, you two geriatric wannabes. Let's be honest here. Educators have a terrible track record when it comes to implementing change. And what you two are suggesting is not just tinkering around the edges, but rather a whole-scale systemic change. May I suggest you pour yourselves a lovely cup of tea, or imbibe something a little more stimulating and accept that what you know is education is about to become irrelevant? Now that I think of it, have a gin and tonic. Make them doubles, as I can sense your fear or frustration. Or is it simply resignation?
Well, Annie, I think it's frustration. I don't think it's resignation. I think that we have a passion to try to ensure that things improve in education as opposed to just give up.
Well, that's where we part ways, Randy. I'm rather cynical. I just don't see any real large scale movement to adapt and adjust our educational system to um, the new realities of our world. Um, we're not ready to do it systemically, and we're not preparing our students for an AI-driven world. It's just not happening, and I just don't see it happening. I'd love to see it. I'd love to be wrong. Prove me wrong, please, but I'm cynical. Studies consistently have proven that project-based learning, active learning consistently shows longer, better outcomes than passive instruction. And that's the kind of thing we need our learners, our students to do. Research has shown us that effortful learning demonstrates that cognitive struggles improve retention and understanding. Critical thinking doesn't emerge critically. It requires explicit instruction and practice. And that's not happening in our classrooms. Don't let anyone tell you that they're teaching critical thinking. It's not happening. And emerging research on generative AI suggests that excessive reliance on AI can reduce independent reasoning and reflection. So there's a real risk. AI wants to make it easy for us, and easy is not good. Not in this case.
So we need to struggle. So what's the good news here? What can we take away from all of this?
Well, first of all, let's recognize that AI is not the problem. It's not ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and all these, not the problem. The danger lies in allowing them to replace thinking rather than supporting and promoting thinking. We need to be teaching our students and our teachers on how to use it actively and productively. We want students to thrive in an AI-rich future because say what you want, it's here to stay. It's not a fad. It's not like yo-yos and hula hoops. It's here to stay. And we have to teach our children now how to question, how to analyze, how to evaluate, how to reason.
Otherwise, we end up with a generation that knows how to ask the right questions to get the answers they want, but can't think for themselves.
And that, my friend, may be the greatest challenge of our time, the greatest educational challenge of our time.
Well, thank you, Grandpapa. And this concludes this part of the podcast. But stay tuned for a next one, which we will talk a little bit more about how AI can help promote thinking.
And highlight the fact that AI is not the problem, it's what you do with it.
Thank you. We'll see you
Bye,
next
all.
time.
See you soon.